welcome to Chapter 1, and this relates to the rationale or the why behind corrective exercise. So this is the first chapter of our preparation course for the corrective exercise specialist, corrective exercise specialization that NASM offers. So this is going to be introductory material, pretty easy to follow for this first section here, but then as we get into the subsequent chapters, you'll start seeing that things are going to get a little bit more intense, but that's okay because the corrective exercise specialization it's pretty tough in terms of the certification itself and everything like that. So let us get down to the nuts and bolts of the first part, which really more or less is just the corrective exercise specialist is going to be able to do what. All right, so first things first, what is it that what is this process that we talk about? Well, obviously we're looking at dysfunction. So where is the body breaking down, and where within either the neurological system or the neuromusculoskeletal system, where is it that we're finding faulty patterns? All right, so that's the first step. All right, the second step for that process is to be able to basically develop an action plan. All right, what is it that you're going to do? How are you going to follow through? How are you going to assess? How are you going to then program and then reassess to see if there's any improvements? All right, and then from there, that's going to be the next thing where you're going to now create this strategy to be able to continue to improve this person's health as they continue on throughout. So assess, program, assess, reprogram for new things, and just create a better healthy situation for that person. And that's that systematic process. All right, systematic meaning that there is organization and sequence behind what you're doing. All right, so with corrective exercise, it needs to be a little bit more focused than if you were going to be the certified personal trainer route, simply because with corrective exercise, there is some imbalance, there is some asymmetry, there is something that is going on with the person that you have to identify, and without that identification, or without coming in with the identification, meaning like PT orders, orthopedic orders, anything like that, then that creates a whole new challenge. So it's a little bit more challenging than trying to just develop a sequence versus just a regular trainer. All right. So if we look at it from a rationalization standpoint, well, are we more movement oriented? Well, we're finding that we're having more musculoskeletal pain now than we were 50 years ago. There's different dysfunctions that are occurring. There's different injuries that are occurring. There's more stresses, whether it be biomechanical or physiological. So all of those things are creating these poor movement qualities that, number one, the general person can't detect it within themselves. All right. So therefore, it's the role of that specialist, or the person who can break down and identify these situations and then create new ways of helping. All right. So we have to look at it from that standpoint. All right. So what really is it? So we have this rationale behind the stresses and the dysfunctions and the imbalances and the injuries, and how we're horrible movers, not everybody, but majority of people. All right. But what is this specialist going to do? Well, it says right there what the primary objective is, and that is to optimize movement quality. Well, yeah, we want to have people move better. And because of that, it's going to improve performance. Now, with performance, I don't mean athletic performance. I mean just performance of movement. All right. The results that you're going to get from that are that you're going to see an improved performance. You're going to see a potential reduction in injury. You'll see better efficiency and quality of movement. You'll be able to recover better in terms of if you were injured or going from one bout to another, that type of recovery. So there's a lot of, when we talk about the terms of optimization, that's what we're referring to in terms of movement quality, not just, can you take 3 steps forward and 3 steps back. All right. But also we have to understand, well, what the role of that exercise specialist is, that corrective exercise specialist. And just like anything else, we're not going to be treating injuries. All right. That's more physical therapists, occupational therapists, orthopedists. All right. Those are the individuals that are going to have that. But what we're going to be doing is we're not treating. We're going to be able to reduce the likelihood of it happening. We're going to try to reduce the severity. We're trying to reduction risk for people who are, hopefully currently healthy, obviously athletes, and that's what we're looking for here. Is that it's more of preventative purposes more so than the reactionary component, which is chiropractic, physical therapy, occupational therapy. All right, so that's what we're looking at there. So with the corrective exercise continuum, there's 4 different mechanisms that we use, 4 phases, and each one of these is going to be broken down into parts in the next not chapter 2, but chapters 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, those 4 chapters will break down separately the inhibit part, which is more of, if you've heard the term before, which you should know about from the expansion of the CPT training, is myofascial techniques. So things like foam rolling, compressive forces like lacrosse balls, softballs, tennis balls, things like that. The next thing would be to lengthen, which, I mean, if you think lengthen, you're talking about stretching. So static, neuromuscular, dynamic stretching. We'll go through all of that. And then from there, you'll go into that activate, which is more of the isolated strengthening. And then integrated, which is more dynamic, more integrated dynamic movements. So we'll go and break down each of those components. But that's the continuum that we're talking about. So, and that's the order that they want to have, NASM really wants you to go through as well, is inhibit, lengthen, activate, integrate. So it's basically getting down to getting things to be unlocked and then being able to get them to be moved. All right. And that's how we want to kind of take that into perspective. When we talk about the interdependence model, all right, or as you would see as RI, all right, there's a regional interdependence. Now, independence meaning separate from, interdependence meaning within, all right, or with working within groups of. So a regional interdependence model really is working on how we take a person's, what is it that you see, what is it that they feel, what are the factors that are going on, how is this person impacted by bad movement patterns. And typically, a lot of times you might get this from a rehab professional, you might get this from like a physical therapist, for example. All right, they're going to be able to give you some sort of way to describe what's going on, what's the primary complaint of what's happening. All right, so then with what you're seeing as the primary complaint, all right, then as a corrective exercise specialist, what we can do is we can use these 4 phases that we just were talking about and use them to be able to improve movement quality, all right, both at the local and global levels. Meaning local, we're talking more of really intrinsic musculature, all right, more of pelvic floor muscles, more of your lumbo-pelvic area, all right, whereas global is more limb-based and how each of those can impact each other, all right. So what we need to do is pay attention to the fact that one area that is hurt does not, just because it's hurting does not mean that that's the area of interest. It could be something above it or below it. So we always have to be paying attention to those aspects as well. All right. But with that though, we have to worry about our scope of practice. All right. So, what is it that's, if we talk about scope of practice, what is it really? It's, the processes that you can do or cannot do depending upon the credentials that you hold. All right. So if you are a corrective exercise specialist, you should not be providing any sort of diagnosis. You should not be saying that this is what it is. Okay. That's really one of the main things, is that, no matter that level, you're not going to be diagnosing injuries. All right. You're also not going to be treating. Treating falls within orthopedics, orthopedic centers, physical therapy. All right, those are more chiropractic. Those are going to be more of your treatments. All right. Now, if you are a corrective exercise specialist who holds the license or the certification for that, and you work under a chiropractor or you work under a physical therapist, that is a whole different set of procedures and scope of practice that you can, because you fall under the umbrella of that chiropractor or that physical therapist. But again, very much under the influence of state and regional regulatory laws that can go into effect there. So you have to make sure that I'm saying it now from the state of Florida where we can do that, but understand that if you live in Iowa or Minnesota or California, you may have to fall under a different umbrella of scope of practice than what Florida would be. So you have to always check with your state and local regulations to see what you can and cannot do. So that's why scope of practice is so important. All right. Because even though you do have a certification or you do have a licensure, you have to make sure you maintain what you are or are not able to do, because you want to fall within the parameters that you can do, the actions, procedures, and processes that you can do. All right. So again, with these these professional scopes of practice, what is it that we have to pay attention to? Well, healthcare and fitness. All right, with healthcare and fitness, where do you fall within that perspective? All right, we do fall within that fitness realm, but how do we take that fitness realm and put it into a healthcare approach, or if we're working within a healthcare setting? All right. We always want to work on that continuum of client care. Okay. We have to understand that there is potential for injury or re-injury. So we have to make sure that we're always taking care of these clients and making sure that we're making sure that they are really getting, the proper care that they need so that they can get better. All right. You then have to follow, with your scope of practice, you have to know what your professional responsibilities are. Again, if you're a dietitian, well, we know that you're very much so able to work within all realms of food and nutrition topics. Well, if you're a personal trainer, you need to be very careful how far you step into that nutrition mold. It's the same thing here. A corrective exercise specialist, it sounds very similar to rehab. Well, with our professional responsibilities, we cannot make it that way. Okay. The scope of practice falls within goals, all right, and goal setting for each person, all right. Your professional setting, where is it that, with your scope of practice, where you can and cannot work, where you can and cannot apply to based on the certification and or degree. Now, if you're in school with me, you understand that, your professional settings, you come out with a bachelor's degree with the certification that changes everything up, okay. What's the population that can you work with the injured? Can you work with the sick? Can you work with the healthy? All right, we have to know all of those, and we can work with them all, but it depends on the situation that you're working within. And then obviously the techniques and skills. You know, as a corrective exercise person, you may be working on your own. Well, with scope of practice, you would not be doing anything with Graston techniques, all right, and fascial release in that scope, because that is outside of it. Now, if you worked in a physical therapy office and you were trained on how to do that, that is a whole different vehicle and mechanism for what you can and cannot do. So be very careful on the skills and techniques that you want to use, because if you do learn them, understand that it's usually within the facility and not so much that it's based on everybody. All right. So your professional scope of practice takes all of these topics into consideration, and you have to understand that at any given point, you go outside of one aspect of this and you can lose your job, or you can be liable. You could, face fines or jail time. It can be pretty severe. So you have to maintain that scope of practice. All right. So with everything here, what are we saying? Well, today's work environment is challenging. Okay, it's challenging because we have to deal with, if you look at not your work environment, but the people that you're going to be working with, there's a lack of inactivity. People sit around all day at desks and they don't get up, and they take a lunch break and they go right back to it. Okay, that's part of it. All right, poor posture. Just take a look at how you're sitting right now, and you can kind of get an idea, especially if you're at the computer. All right, and then because of that, a lot of times, depending upon your job, just say that you're a garbage truck worker. The movements that you do every day are repetitive, and because of that, they're a culminating effect to something that is going to be traumatic to you, that can lead to dysfunction. All right, if you're always using your left hand or you're always using your right hand, think about a baseball pitcher and they're constantly throwing a ball over and over and over again. Well, there is going to be some overuse because of that repetitive movement. Well, if you ever looked at a baseball player's shoulders at the end of the year, you'll see that they're massively different. So you have to be aware of that. So that's what overuse injuries are a common thing. Well, it's also common within the workforce as well. All right. So with that, we have to understand what our role is, and that's obviously to help movement quality and then reduce potential risk. And then, like we said before, to make sure that we're following along with this corrective exercise continuum that we're going to continue to learn about to improve movement quality for everybody. Okay, so we have to take all four of those phases that we learned about, right? And if just to kind of go back over again, inhibit, lengthen, activate, integrate. All right, go through all of those, and that will give us that continuum approach so that we can get more biomechanically sound, so we can be more physiologically sound, and so that our human movement system can work in the best patterns possible to create the best movement and reduce that feeling of hurt, pain, or just injury in general. Okay, so again, chapter 1, like I said, was pretty easy. Nothing too difficult to understand here, but just continue to follow along and understand that these concepts are going to keep coming up over and over again as we move to the next, additional 17 chapters after this. So I appreciate you all taking the time to listen, and we hope to hear from everybody soon. Have a great day.